The best fathers have the softest, sweetest hearts. In other words, great dads are real marshmallows. Rochelle E. Goodrich, author of Slaying Dragons, quotes poetry and a few short stories for every day of the year. All right. Good morning and welcome to another morning episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. Do me a favor, folks. If you enjoy this show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to my channel. And for the really serious folks out there, make sure that you hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. All right. Today is another episode of Dad Talk. Dad Talk is my series to bring on everyday dads to talk about what is important to them. The goal of Dad Talk is to raise dad voices. No arguments, no debates, and we're not really talking politics unless the dads want to. And my only requirement is that we keep it family friendly and that whatever we talk about is related to being a dad. Today, Cliff Johnson joins me in this episode to discuss teaching children self-defense. Please welcome Cliff to Dad Talk. Good morning, sir.
Hi, good morning, DL. It's great to be with you.
Awesome. All right. So you are Coach Cliff, as I know you. And let me adjust my screen here. There we go. So you're Coach Cliff, as I know you. You're a local dad here, and you are a jiu-jitsu instructor. So for the audience, tell people a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, right now I'm the owner and head instructor of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Baymeadows here in Jacksonville, and we've been open for just a little over 2 years. And the school is thriving, and I also have 2 children. My wife and I have been married for 13 years, and we've got an 8-year-old, and we have a newborn now. Well, I guess he's 6 months.
Mhm.
And so life is just carrying us through this journey, and we're running a business and still at the stage of working day jobs. So we're working a lot, and we've got a lot going on with the children, and it's a busy time, but a very fun time.
Absolutely. So what got you into jiu-jitsu in the first place?
What got me into jiu-jitsu in the first place? I came up wrestling just as an athlete through middle school and high school, and I started noticing in MMA that wrestlers did a good job and had successful careers. That piqued my interest, so I would watch to see how that was going, and I came across a YouTube channel called the Gracie Breakdown, where Henner and his brother Hiron Gracie would watch a UFC fight where a submission took place on the ground to win the fight. And they would break it down for sort of the layman to be able to understand, what exactly happened and what made it work. And what were some of the things that the person defending needed to know, and what were they trying to do, and what did the person who win, how did they set that up? And I thought that was really fascinating. So I would start to watch UFC and other MMA channels, and then afterwards I would immediately tune in to these guys and start to understand the techniques better.
Mm-hmm.
And then just at the end of one of their videos, they kind of called out people who were just like myself, and they would say, "Look, if you're watching these breakdowns and you're not training, then you're wrong, and you need to fix yourself." So I thought, oh my gosh, they're talking to me. And so I got into jiu-jitsu, and I knew that the years I had spent wrestling would help me there, and it felt like they might just go to waste. And I've just always been interested in self-defense and things like this. And so it's been a journey of 8 years up to this point, and I'm really grateful for it. It's one of my favorite things in the world.
That's awesome. So then you went from wrestler to jiu-jitsu. And then at what point did you say, let me shift gears now and not just learning, but now I'm teaching?
That shift came during COVID. actually. I always love to teach.
Mhm,
I've had people my whole life tell me that, like, wow, you really like teaching. And it's just, if I know something and it's interesting, and we've got a group of people that are practicing jujitsu on the mat, for instance, even if I wasn't the head instructor, I would love to just stay late, in classes, and just
mhm,
converse with the other students, and discuss the things that we were discovering, and help in any way that I could. And I always got a lot of encouragement, even from my own instructors. And so when COVID happened, there was an opportunity to actually get aligned with Henner and Hero and Gracie and their organization, and become what is called a certified training center. And they have a whole pipeline that students could go through to ultimately come certified as one of their instructors. And they have just a complete curriculum from start to finish. It takes about 10 years. And all of that was very fascinating. And since where I lived at the time, we were locked down, and we couldn't do much else, I just began that process.
mhm.
And lo and behold, that led us to getting all of the different certifications that we needed, and flying out to California, and meeting the Gracies and training with them several times, and finishing up that process. And then learning everything about starting a business,
Mhm.
uh, our first physical location, then finding our second physical location about a year in, and here we are. So it was really a product of just, I was sort of the right person at the right time, and then also just really setting what felt like a very big goal,
Mhm.
and refusing to take no for an answer, just knocking down one barrier at a time.
So is this, and don't mind me, but is this your first business that you've started?
It is, yeah.
Wh
This is the
how
first
how
business.
intimidating was that?
It's it was intimidating, and it's always intimidating.
Right.
One of the great advice that we got was just continue reading, constantly.
Mhm,
You need knowledge, you need organized knowledge, and you need inspiration. And so I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I read as often as I can. And one of the things I've picked up is just how important persistence is, and to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because at least for the first 5, 10 years, you're constantly going to be doing something new
mhm.
almost every week that you've never done before. And that's where it feels uncomfortable, and stressful, and anxiety uh, creating. So it was stressful when we first got started, but it still can feel stressful today. But we just constantly tell ourselves, my wife and I, you know what, we're comfortable being uncomfortable. We're excellent problem solvers. So when
Mhm.
problems come up, we just uh, we just take them head on, and take them one by one.
Awesome. That's great. So now my audience knows that I am not the best. We had this conversation the other day that I'm not the best when it comes to scheduling people. But what was interesting about you as a guest in particular is not so much that, hey, you're just my son's instructor. I'm always looking for dads, but I'm always not looking for dads, right? Like something, because I'm so busy trying to prepare for the next show that I don't think about some of the other things, and I'm sure that you can relate as a business owner. There are certain things that maybe are easier to focus on than others. But I saw this comment and I mentioned it to you, so I'm gonna put it up on the screen here. Let me make that a little bit bigger so that people can actually see that. So I saw this comment here, and it I'm adjusting my screen here, so I apologize. It says, the initial comment says every girl should learn self-defense at school. It's from the BBC News. And then somebody responded and said every boy should learn not to be an abusive incel at school. Anybody that's not familiar with incel, that's just a slanderous term for somebody that I think has just sworn off women or something like that.
Okay.
Um, so, but so never mind the slurs. But I thought that was interesting because it was like the response to it was like, hey, every boy should learn. And I'm like, yes, they should. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for all these boys to learn to be, proper young men, proper boys, proper young men, and then grow into proper men, women should and girls should learn self-defense. So this kind of triggered me to think like, hey, wait a minute. My son's coach is a dad. And so then I approached you and you were very interested. So when you see a comment like this, what goes through your mind as somebody who's actually an instructor?
Well, several things, sort of all at once. I'm inclined to agree with the BBC News's point there. Every girl should learn self-defense, and I would love self-defense to be taught as a school curriculum. It's like its own language,
Mhm.
and it gives a lot of confidence to the kids, and that's fantastic. The response back to it, saying that every boy should learn how to behave in school, so we don't have to do that. I feel like that's a little bit of a fairy tale, to act like you can just do some sort of a sweeping brush and then fix all that problem. And then, what are we saying? What about when the little girls grow up and become adults? Are we going to say, all crime should just stop, and we wouldn't have to worry about anybody's safety? Or maybe, we should just make it illegal to commit crime and then everyone would be safe. That sounds nice, I suppose, when you say it out loud, but it's not realistic.
Mhm. So, what I find interesting about your instruction to the kids, because I sit there and I watch, is it seems very, very practical. Which is like, I took taekwondo when I was a young kid, and I had friends that took different martial arts, and just from looking back to my memory of things, a lot of it didn't really feel very practical. But yours is, and so like one of the things that stood out to me, and I would like you to kind of expand upon this and some of the other lessons, and then like how you come across them. But one of the things that stood out to me was you guys were doing a lesson, and you were teaching kids something. I don't remember exactly how the prelude to it, but it was something along the lines of like, "Hey, if somebody tries to take you from somewhere and they're not supposed to take you, what do you do?" And if I remember correctly, you said not to just scream and yell, but specifically you were teaching them scream, "You are not my father," which I was like, well, that's interesting. Like it didn't really occur to me that this would be a better lesson than just screaming, because once I heard that, I realized, like, how many times have I seen a parent walking out of the store with a screaming kid? Right. And like, I think, man, rough on them today. Could be me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It doesn't draw the kind of attention that the child may think that if I just call for help or say no, I don't want to go, and I just fight and resist, parents will still turn a blind eye to that. So in the case of an abduction, I'm so grateful to be in this space because even I'm learning,
Mhm.
as we go and prepare the lessons. I research, and I've got some great material from the Gracies as well too. And yeah, you need to have the child yell something else other than looking like a child throwing a tantrum that doesn't want to leave the playground or doesn't want to leave Disneyland or doesn't want to leave the grocery stores, as you've just said. And so if a child were to be taken away by an adult that they don't know and they're yelling things like fire
Mhm.
or um, you know I don't know this person, this is not my father, that's going to draw greater chance of bystander intervention,
Mhm.
which is what they would really need in that point.
What are some of the other lessons, if you don't mind, that is a matter of everyday practicality that you teach kids that people may be kind of surprised about?
We have what are called the 5 rules of engagement,
Mhm.
right, for children, specifically around bullying. And the problem with bullying is interesting because everyone is aware of it. All of the adults are aware of it. All of
Mhm.
the school administration is aware of it. And they simply have a zero tolerance policy where the schools will say anybody fighting is going to get in trouble, no matter who started it, right? If you're involved in a fight, there's no reason to hit another kid or to fight another kid. So everybody is just wrong and everybody is going to be punished.
Mhm.
And it is a solution, but we can see that it doesn't work, right? If it solved the problem, then there would be no more bullying, and that would be fantastic. But yet there still is, right? And so we offer the students the 5 rules of engagement on top of that, meaning that if you find yourself you're being bullied physically or verbally, right, by another child at school or in your neighborhood or things like this, and you follow these 5 rules of engagement, your parents will support you, and then myself and the other coaches will also support you. So no
Mhm.
matter what trouble you get in at school, you'll be just fine with mom and dad, and you'll be just fine with us. And that is very empowering because, you know, we raise our children to listen to the adults, and they can be confused and be put in basically a rock and a hard place where they're being mistreated, and maybe they even have the skills to stand up for themselves,
Mhm.
but they're afraid of the retribution from their parents. They're afraid of getting in trouble with the school, and so they just endure abuse, which can have long lasting effects simply because they don't have the framework to be able to understand what they should do when, and how much force, they should reach to solve that bullying situation. So the 5 rules of engagement are really powerful, and I'm really proud to share them with our children. And basically, the 5 rules are this: the first rule of engagement is avoid the fight at all cost.
Mhm.
And we say that simply because as the child has had 6 months, a year, 2 years, and their knowledge begins to pile up, they're going to realize that they're quite good at winning a physical contest with another child. And so they're going to start to say, wow, I could maybe solve all of my problems, just by doing jujitsu, and that would make them a bully, right? So we make
Right.
that very clear right off
Turn them
the.
into Cobra Kai.
That's right. We don't want it to become Cobra Kai. Exactly. So we give them the tools, and we say, hey, avoid the fight at all costs, because nobody training at this academy is allowed to be a bully. And if I find out
Mhm.
that's the case, you won't be able to train here anymore. The second rule of engagement is that if you're physically attacked, defend yourself. So we make it very clear cut for them. You try to avoid the fight, but if you can't, if you're cornered, if you're in a situation where you'd have to turn your back to somebody who's threatening you,
Mhm.
then you can't leave, and you need to defend yourself. The third rule of engagement is when verbally attacked, which is the most common form of bullying. Use what we call the 3 T steps: just talk, tell, and tackle. And we teach them through the first T step to stand up for themselves to the bully.
Mhm.
And they practice that. They practice using their voice. They practice getting themselves in the right state, and then using the right both verbal and like body language cues while they're exuding confidence and standing up to the bully. We teach them to inform the adults, like tell their parents, tell the teacher, and then also ask the parents and the teacher to inform the principal,
Mhm.
because they're building a case with the adults and with the principal,
Mm.
so that should they end up defending themselves, it's not new information to anyone. And if they're sitting in the principal's office getting ready to get suspended or given detention or
Mhm.
even maybe expelled, and the principal says, hey, why did the teachers have to pull you off the mount position from, just using a name, Michael, right? What was that all about? And say, hey, remember when my parents told you that Michael was shoving me and was taking my things and throwing them in the trash and calling me names and all of this type of stuff? Then you know, I had to stand up for myself. And then he challenged me to a fight. So the principal, you know, what they're going to do from there is out of our hands, but at
Mhm.
least the child has learned to build a case for themselves before things get even further.
Right.
The fourth rule of engagement is never punch or kick the bully, right? So we teach the children to close the distance, get their hands on an attacker, and get them down to the ground, and then get to position of dominance, control them, exhaust them, use their weight and use those controls to make the bully just tired and take the fight out of them. And then they also have joint locks they can use, which will give pain compliance or ultimately can break an arm. And the final rule of engagement is when applying a submission, use minimal force and negotiate. So the best outcome in a physical fight between one of our students and a bully would be that they get to a position of dominance like the mount, keep, are able to nail them down to the ground and keep them there.
Mhm.
isolate one of their arms, put them in one of these locks, and begin to slowly apply the pressure so that um, the child starts to feel the pain come on, the bully does, and they want to surrender. And
Mhm.
then once they surrender, the students are taught to give them to force them to verbally apologize and surrender so that they realize there's gonna be some public humiliation anytime you pick a fight with me.
Mhm.
And I think for the other verbal 3 T steps, yeah, stand up for yourself. So talk to the bully, tell the grown-ups, and then the final T step there is actually tackle, which is really unique in that we teach the children not to physically tackle the bully if they're being bullied verbally. So if they're being called names or they're having lies spread about them. But once they've told the bully, "Hey, don't talk to me like that. If you don't want me to talk to you like that, stop this behavior." And they've also told the teacher, and the behavior doesn't stop. They've told their parents. Both the teacher and the parents have told the principal. Then they have this option of tackle that they go to. So they sort of escalate their own uh, through their own protocols. And the final protocol there is to use their words to tackle the bully, essentially. And what they do is they put them to a yes or no question, and they say, "Hey, let me ask you a question. Are you challenging me to a fight?" And that's what we want our students to ask the bully once they've gone through all of those other steps. And if the bully says yes, it's like, okay, get ready. Say, "I'm right here. Do something. I'm not afraid of you." And if the bully says no, then they respond back with, "Well, stop wasting my time because I'm not afraid of you." And
Mhm.
saying that verbally in front of all of the other kids in school uh, does a lot to make the bully want to give them a wide berth when they see them on the playground or on the campus.
So I'm interested in the answer to this. You said that you teach them not to punch or kick. And is that a like a hard and fast rule like ever, or is that just like, it might come to that point at a later time, or like kind of, and then if not, if never, why is that?
Well, that's interesting. So you told me that you did, I believe, karate or taekwondo when you were
Yeah,
younger.
taekwondo.
I also did taekwondo when I was younger,
Mhm.
and I absolutely loved it because all the action movies that were out
Right, right.
at
Some
that
Jean-Claude
time, and
Van Damme, all that good stuff.
you named it, yeah, exactly. And wanted to be just like that, run around the house, punching and kicking all
Mhm.
the couch cushions, and um, what's really powerful about jujitsu is that when you bring somebody down to the ground, you can a smaller person, and we have just hundreds of incidents to be or yeah instances to be able to verify this, but a smaller person through different pins that they can switch between can actually hold down someone who's much bigger than them if they have more knowledge and skill.
Mhm.
And through that control, you could just stay there until the fight is broken up, or you could move on to submissions and joint locks. In Taekwondo, all I was ever taught was to kick and punch.
Mhm.
And the problem with that strategy is the student who's defending themselves cannot control the lethality of the attacks that they're using to defend themselves. So if they punch or kick a bully in a struggle, in a fight in the schoolyard, and the bully loses their balance and falls back and then lands and hits their head on concrete or something otherwise solid, and then suffers major injury or maybe even death, there's nothing that the striking practitioner can do once they've thrown that punch to guarantee what's going to be the outcome to the other person. Through jujitsu and having the rule of never punch or kick the bully, we can feel confident that the child's going to defend themselves using jujitsu. And once they get to the mount, they're going to use control grips and submissions
Mhm.
to get pain compliance instead of causing head trauma, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, yeah. I like if people want an example of this, if they have seen, I mentioned Cobra Kai a moment ago, which I realize is fictional. I mean, there's not high schools full of ninjas, warring at each other.
Right.
But there was, I think it was the the season episode for like one or two, where where two of the kids were fighting to the protagonist, and one of them they're at school and he kicks the other guy, and the guy goes back, and I think he falls over the balcony and lands like on the stairs, and then like something happens to his neck, and he was pretty much immobile and in the hospital. And like that wasn't like, if you watch the scene, it's pretty clear that he wasn't intending to go that far,
Hmm.
right? And like he was really shocked that it happened. They just were in the middle of a battle, and the fog of war, if you will, like things happened. So it's kind of interesting, and I realize that again, that's fictional, but it's a certain reality. Like you said, you could kick somebody, they could fall back, trip over something, hit their head. That's the more simple and likely outcome. So that's just interesting because I think everything. When I was in martial arts, we learned a slightly different version of it. It was called the ABCs of fighting. You avoid, you back away, and then you conquer. And the avoid was like, if you see guys coming down the street and they're looking like rough characters, maybe cross over the street, just basically try to avoid the situation altogether and don't get into it. If they cross the street and approach you, then try to back away, like, hey, I don't want any trouble, guys, leave me alone. But then if then if you are stuck, then you conquer. And so it's a little different. And obviously, punching and kicking was you that was my only option. So,
Hmm.
but I think it's very interesting. Have you had any situations so far where a kid has used something that they've learned at school and maybe got in trouble?
Uh, to this point, no, I've not had any of my students have physical altercations at
Mhm.
school. I have had a lot of parents give me the feedback that their children feel comfortable telling them if there is a student in their class
Mhm.
or in their school that's behaving as a bully, right?
Right.
And then the parent can now work with that child and remind them of the techniques that they have, and that we teach them to role play at home. So we'll teach the parents like, hey, you can actually let your child practice standing up for themselves, so it becomes a reflex.
Mhm.
So we like to use the term cantaloupe head. It doesn't really hurt any of the kids' feelings. And then we role play on the mats, and we'll say, hey, what if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, get out of my way, cantaloupe head, right? And then pushes you out of the way because they're 2 years older than you, they're bigger than you, and they're just forcing you out of their way in the hallway or something. And then how to stand up for yourself and go up to them and turn them around, and tell them, hey, don't do that again, don't talk to me like that, and begin to escalate through those three verbal T steps. So I have had a lot of parents give me feedback that the children are standing up for themselves. And like for your son Zach, since he's in our younger class at this point, mostly it's just verbal,
Mhm.
bullying that I think the real young kids are coming across. So that's
Right.
that's what we've experienced just up to this point.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was just curious because I'm very curious to hear how a school responds, because now I haven't been in school in quite a while. But my experience back in school was the teachers would be, and the administrative and the staff would say, hey, you tell somebody, and then you would tell somebody, and then they would kind of sort of, but not really do anything about it. They would like basically wag their finger at the other kid. And at best, the kid found something else to do. And then at worst, you would have like some of your other peers now upset with you because now you went and, told on them.
Mhm.
And so from my perspective, things just get worse, which goes to your point earlier about it doesn't really work with the zero tolerance policy.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a very tough position for the schools to be in.
Mhm.
And as fathers and as parents, everybody, we just want our children to be safe, and to be respected, and to learn how to show respect to everybody
Right.
else as they're growing up. And yeah, the zero tolerance policy, it's doomed to fail, because hurt people,
Mhm.
right? And a lot of bullies come from homes where they're basically just regurgitating the behavior that they experience
Mhm.
on a daily basis. I certainly believe that. And then others also learn that they can sort of develop a power, and a popularity by behaving, as a bully and belittling others. So, as far as how the school reacts to it, there's not much else that they can do except
Mhm.
try to bring the child together with the bully, make them shake hands and say, okay, promise
Mhm.
not to do it again. And if that works, there would be no bullying. Right. And
Right.
so we know that that doesn't work. It can actually make it worse because now the child is forced to stand face to face with someone who's been abusing them and, you know, shake hands when the child doesn't believe that this is going to be the end of it. The bully doesn't believe this is going to be the end of it. And as you alluded to, this might actually make it worse.
Mhm.
Um, so they need to have these rules of engagement and understand that if they follow those, they're going to have the love and support from their parents back home. And then
Mhm.
also at the Jiu-Jitsu Academy, they're going to have total support. And if need be, then they'll spend 3 days at home, with mom and dad. And
Mhm.
maybe if they did things really, really well, then they'll actually go out and get an ice cream, to help them get over the emotional impact of the
Mhm.
incident, and then it'll be okay. And not to be just terrified of authority to where you won't actually end up protecting yourself.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned the ice cream. I know a guy here locally, and his son was being bullied. Now he wasn't in any kind of martial arts or anything like that along that line, but he told the school, he said, "Look, I'm telling you right now, deal with this bully situation. My son is being bullied, and my son." And I think in this case, he told me that his son was actually a little bit on the bigger side, so a little bit out of the ordinary. But I've seen small bullies too,
Sure.
and he told the school, he said, "Look, if you don't deal with this, I'm going to tell my son, take a swing, do what you got to do. And when you inevitably suspend him for however long you suspend him, I'm taking for him for ice cream every single day." And the school, sure enough, in this case, they resolved that issue. But typically, my experience is that schools aren't very good because they're too busy following all these rules, which, in my opinion, favor bullies in a sense because they don't give any power to the kid that's being bullied. Whereas I think when I hear what your strategy is, these five things, and then the talking, that tells, and then of course you mentioned it. You said, "Hey, we've had some experiences where we can see that kids are comfortable, in letting people know and talking." And I think that's a core component long before the bullying happens is developing the self-confidence. Do tell me about the self-confidence that you see as you instruct kids, the growth of it.
Well, through constant space repetition, right, you can grow everyone's confidence. And to the greater point that you were just making about what the school's policy can be, and then how does that affect the children that are involved in a bullying situation. um, the five rules of engagement, especially when there's verbal bullying, which is the most common, right,
Mhm.
form of bullying. That final of the three T steps, which we call tackle, when you put the bully to a question, you're like, hey, let me ask you a question. You've been calling me cantaloupe head, as we use an example, right? You've been calling me these names, and I tell you to stop. The teacher tells you to stop. You don't do it. Let me ask you something. Do you want to fight me? Are you challenging me to a fight? And that is really an incredible strategy because the bully now is left with only three options of what they're going to do. And I can teach the children what to expect from those three options. They're either
Mhm.
going to say yes, they're going to say no, or they're going to try to avoid the question altogether and joke about it as if it's not important, or just ignore you, which is another way of saying no.
Mhm.
And that's a very powerful thing to teach to the students, because I asked them, and I love to have this conversation with all the parents in the room,
Mhm.
right? Because I can just sort of feel the shock that comes over some of the parents. I ask the students, like, when you say, "Hey, are you challenging me to a fight? Are you starting the fight?" And the children give a mix of answers. Usually if it's the first time that they've heard it, and I'm saying, you almost are, right? You almost are. You have put the bully between a rock and a hard place, And now they have to make a decision,
Mhm.
right? And they probably woke up that morning and they just have the habit of abusing other children to sort of elevate their own status,
Mhm.
at the school. And they've probably picked out smaller kids. They've picked out kids who they believe will not stand up for themselves. And then on this day, totally unexpected to the bully, they are now put to this hard question that, like, before you go anywhere else, you're either going to fight me or you're going to buzz off,
Mhm.
right? And this is going to be done in a very public way. And if the bully says, "Oh, I don't want to fight you," their whole entourage, everybody that's there to see that, understands very clearly that the bully is now afraid of the student,
Mhm.
right? Or if they try to laugh it off and they try to ignore the situation, then we have the student actually follow up with, "Stop wasting my time because I'm not afraid of you. If you're going to do something, I'm here, right? Do something
Mhm.
about it.
Mhm.
Otherwise, stop wasting my time." And nobody wants to be called a waste of the time. So the bully's power is taken from them in a very public way. And as far as how the school should behave, it's a very tough question. I I would also probably have them keep the zero tolerance policy, but I would really advocate for jujitsu and self defense to be taught to students in school,
Mhm.
right? If all the students in school had that as a curriculum, I think it would be a lot more difficult for any one student to start to behave as a bully. If all of the students were starting to get that confidence that, hey, I can handle myself. If an older child, a bigger child gets on top of me, I'm not going to be claustrophobic. I do
Mhm.
this every week. I know how to get to a position of power where I can defend myself and I can uh, advance, in the fight from these positions. And I have a strategy that I practice through every day. So their confidence goes up tremendously.
That's I think it's great personally, and I like the strategy. And to be honest with you, it's probably better than the strategy that I would tell my own son. If he were being bullied, I would be like, "Well, it sounds like he needs his eye dotted, son." Um, but I come from a slightly different background, a little bit more tumultuous. I got into a bit too many fights, hung around the wrong crowd, so on and so forth. So, but I like this strategy now as a dad because one, things that I did as a kid weren't necessarily a strategy. They were just whatever I could do to, I was just existing in a sense. I was just kind of going along. But these days, I tend to follow this notion of something, in my circles we call the non-aggression principle, which is basically you cannot aggress against somebody who's not aggressed against you. And then we followed up with, a certain level of proportionality. So, like in theory, if somebody slaps you, then maybe you could give them a slap back. But if someone slaps you, you can't pull out a gun and shoot them, right? Like it's disproportionate. And so
Right.
I like what I'm here, what you're teaching and what you're explaining here, because it very much says, hey, this is not only a confidence builder, it's also a way to manage the situation in real time, and then do so proportionately. Because before jujitsu, I had never really thought of the idea of, like, what if you punch the kid in the face and he stumbles back and hits his head? You might have been just trying to defend yourself,
Right.
you know, and you're not a violent kid, and now all of a sudden you look like a lunatic, and there's going to be serious problems to deal with it. So I really like the strategy that you have here. And I'm gonna kind of boast a little bit about you, because one of the things that my wife and I talk about, we're like, man, because we tell people about your school and we're like, he is so good with kids. Is that something that just comes natural to you? Is like, or is that something that the training helped bring out, or what? Because when I'm like, folks, when he's training, he's like, all right, imagine that you're at school and there's a second grader or a third grader and they say this to you, and you like really lay out this scenario that seems very, very realistic. Like it actually could happen. It's not like, All right, suppose you're standing there and someone comes up and they've got, a piano chord. I'm exaggerating, of course, and they,
Right.
and you're like, okay, when's that going to happen, right? It's more like, hey, somebody's calling you a name. What do you do? Somebody pushes you. What do you do? And so, getting back to my question, is that just a natural thing for you? Are you just naturally that good with kids, or did you have to learn it?
I think both,
Mhm,
in a way, right? I've had some great training when I was coming through and getting certified to become an instructor. And I consider myself always a student, of
mhm,
course, as we should. So I'm always watching people teach anything, right?
mhm,
And when I see students performing an action well, whether it's a sport or something, like dancing or playing an instrument or whatnot, I really love to see how is the teacher conveying this, to their student or to their students. And I see what I can take from that and then add into what we do at the academy. But also, teaching through telling stories really helps things stick. So I do love to tell a story and build a mental picture for the children to help, keep their interest. And then we role play, right? And we say that now you get to be an actor. One of you is going to pretend to be the bully, and you're going to get to come up. And all of our uniforms are white, right? So we might tell them like, the bully is going to say, "I told you not to wear white," and then push the bully, and then that become or push the student, and that becomes the trigger for the student to begin to move into whatever technique that we've got for the day.
mhm.
And I do. I love working with children. I love having children, and I get a lot of energy from that. But also, there's been some really great training, that's come from the Gracies in that point. And also, as we were talking before about punches and kicks being the only tool that a child has in the tool belt, being able to escalate your force as necessary
Mhm,
is extremely valuable. And when I started training jujitsu, just for my own enjoyment and my own knowledge,
mhm,
I quickly realized that, man, I think this is the most powerful martial art that there is. And I believe that plays itself out in the professional world of fighting.
mhm,
When you talk about the greatest of all time, some of the names that would be said would be Khabib Nurmagomedov, and
mhm,
he won by dragging everyone down to the ground, right? And Conor McGregor is very famous; he strangled him.
mhm,
John Jones is another one. He wins through a lot of striking, but he has the wrestling background and he's won through a lot of submissions. George St. Pierre is another one that would constantly bring people down to the ground. And when our children grow up, right, I have a daughter. And so we don't teach the young kids strangles,
mhm,
but she's going to have the ability as a teenager and as she gets older to, if somebody were to grab a hold of her and it were to become a dangerous situation, like for an assault, for instance, she can use jujitsu to keep herself in safe positions, as compared to the person that might be attacking her. But she can also attack with, like I said, joint locks where she can break arms, she can break legs, but she can also get a hold of the neck and either make the person go unconscious as if she had thrown a knockout punch.
mhm,
But, asking someone who's 100 pounds, to knock out a man, I believe is very unlikely, you
mhm.
know, even realistic.
Right.
But you can absolutely teach someone to cut off the blood flow and then make them pass out. And then if it was an even more dire situation, holding on to it for an extended period of time gives you lethal force. And you can never leave home without it. And you can scale through all that
Mhm,
however it's necessary. So you can have a small child learning to do some really strong takedowns, learning how to protect their head, learning how to expect punches, learning that they're not made out of glass and not to stop.
mhm.
In the
Right.
case they are getting punched, but to continue to go forward with their system that they're
Mhm.
working through as they fight the bully, all the way up to teenagers and adults. It's just applicable all through life, and
Right.
for that reason, I absolutely love it, and it's my privilege to be able to teach it to the kids.
Yeah, I can't agree more, especially when it comes to young girls. I mean, boys have a tendency to get in fights, and there's a different dynamic there than when girls get into a physical altercation with somebody, especially with a boy. But what I tell people, and this is what I think is really neat about about what you're saying, is that I tell people, I'm like, I am 120 pounds soaking wet, and I'm 5'3". So like virtually nobody's going to be intimidated by me. And I certainly am not necessarily, you know, big enough for people to think, I bet he's going to overpower me. However, having said that, I tell people, I, even at this size, can overpower physically most women that I know. Just as a matter of men's strength,
Yeah,
women's strength, right? There are some exceptions, and I even know I know one woman who is actually smaller than me, who I would definitely never tangle with because I think she's quite ferocious.
sure.
You know, and I mean, she's my good friend, so I wouldn't anyway. But and aside from the fact that I'm also a gentleman, but but the point being, like, I think this is a good thing for women and young girls to learn. Like you said, they're not made of glass, and you do have a certain level of power available to you. You know, if you need it, and you know, all the way up to potentially lethal. Hopefully, nobody ever has to use that. So I think it's really interesting. Um, let's see here. Dude, I'm looking at some of the comments here. I'm just going to bring this comment up on the screen here. You can or cannot respond if you want to. Ronda Rousey brought people to the ground. I didn't like the disrespectful way she was toward her opponents. I know it's TV, but she did act like that in real life. I didn't see her as a role model to women. I'm not from. I know who Ronda Rousey is, but I never really watch any of her fights. Do you have any instruction that you tell the kids? Okay, a bully has come up to you, you went through the process and it ended up in an altercation for whatever reason. What is the instruction that you give them after the fact? Okay, now you've beat the kid, you put him in a submission, you've whatever you needed to do to
Yeah.
to get them to stop
The
being the
bully
bully.
surrendered. Yeah, they said, okay, all right, I give up. I give up. I don't want to fight anymore. And at that point, before actually, getting out of the pin and letting everything go, we have the student confirm what the bully is saying,
Mhm.
right? And is saying, hey, promise you're not going to mess with me anymore, right? So the bully's like, all right, I promise. I say, hey, say it again. All right, I promise. Say you're sorry also. All right, I'm sorry. Say it again, right? Okay, I'm sorry. And then the student gets off, and then it's essentially, let bygones be bygones. If the problem doesn't persist any further,
Mhm.
and in our experience as a greater organization, is we've got nearly 300 schools around the world that all teach the same curriculum.
Mhm.
Um, a bully is not, if they're going to continue going on to even be a bully, they're not going to be looking for that child, right?
Right.
That just did that to them in a very public way, right? So that is essentially our protocol, and then yeah, to Ronda Rousey and other professional fighters, their behavior is all over the charts, right? So we absolutely don't use them as role models. However, the results of her career and the success that she had bringing people down to the ground, and then using the joint lock, specifically the armbar in her case, we can at least see that it works, and we can
Mhm.
study how that it works, from those examples. And then the ethics and the morality, we need to layer on top of that, instead of looking at any professional fighter, or really anybody on television at all. I would say,
Mhm.
if you don't actually know them, don't be surprised if skeletons come out of the closet, and then you build them up as a role model to your children, and then afterwards you have to say, ooh, I didn't know they were going to say that, or they were going to behave in this way. So
Right.
we don't use individuals as role models,
Mhm.
at the academy, for that exact reason. But we do pay attention to the results, and we can see it's just undeniable that when one person knows how to grapple and knows
Right.
jujitsu, and the fight goes down to the ground, you can see who has more experience. It
Right.
becomes very clear right away. And so, sometimes I get asked questions of, coach, what happens if the bully knows jujitsu,
It's a good question.
right? To which case I say, hey, now you've reached an unfortunate reality. Like you could also say, hey, coach, what if the bully brings a knife? What if
Mhm.
the bully brings a gun, right? What if there are two bullies? And to which I have to explain, like, running away is a very good option too,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? And if you get into a struggle with a bully and you're defending yourself and you detect that they know jujitsu as well or maybe even better than you do, I tell them that you've made a very big mistake. You're going to have to use all of your energy and skills to disengage from that fight because it's an unwinnable fight.
Mhm.
In striking, they have a term called a puncher's chance, where you're like, well, clearly one person is far more skilled in striking, but maybe one of your wild punches will land on target and end the fight for you, and you might get lucky. We don't say that in jiu-jitsu. When two students train and spar together at full contact, the person who's more experienced wins 10 out of 10 times. If that makes sense.
Mhm.
So it's the same thing as trying to tell a student, yeah, just if there's a bully and his friend and they're going to fight you, just like how you saw in this Marvel movie, go ahead and stand up to both of them because you're really tough and you're really trained. That's unrealistic. No person can defeat two of themselves. Maybe somebody who has enough training can defeat two untrained,
Right.
other students. Is possible. It's even happened, but it's unrealistic to give that belief, to a child. So,
Mhm.
in the case of weapons, in the case of multiple attackers, in the case of an attacker that is more skilled than you, the answer is you have to just continue to build your skills to where the likelihood that you could ever come across somebody in your school that knows jujitsu better than you do just continues to get smaller and smaller as you train for more and more years.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I have a friend. His name is Maj Toure. He teaches gun safety and um, and other things along that line. And he has this saying that he got, I believe, from his grandma. I think he said, um, "I would rather somebody say there he goes than there he lays." Right? Like sometimes, the best answer is exit the situation, right? Especially if in firearms, but but ultimately, I think that's a good lesson. Like you don't always have to be the tough guy. This is really about self defense, being kind of backed in a corner. I've got to defend myself, but otherwise, I'm going to do everything in my power to not get into a physical altercation. So,
Yeah, and we also, we like to end the classes with fun games so
mhm,
that in jujitsu, if a child is not really getting the better of his training partners and has had a tough class, we like to end on a very high note so that it becomes easy for the parents to bring their children back to class because they
mhm,
want to come and they want to play and these sorts of things. And so one of the games that we play is dodgeball at the end of class, and in between the different rounds of the dodgeball, I'll put questions to the children, and I'll say to them, "What do you do if you're attacked by three bullies, or two bullies, or things like that? Raise your hand if you can answer this question." And then through constant space repetition, they know the answer. They're like,
right.
"Oh, run away, run away!" Okay, and that's what we're practicing, with dodgeball, right? And I give them the example of in the military, right? In the US military, I like to use the example of fighter pilots. Like, the fighter pilots can be out in a combat zone and they can detect the enemy. And we can know that we have superior technology and training and these types of things. And the pilot may not be afraid, but their boss comes over the radio, as I tell it to the kids, and tells them like, hey, this we're not going to engage right now because the conditions are not in our favor. Maybe you're outnumbered, okay, and we're going to retreat from this situation and we're going to
Mhm,
find a position of tactical advantage to come back again later. And so I give the children permission to understand that running away doesn't mean you're afraid. It means you're trained.
mhm,
Actually, stay and fight multiple people means that that you don't understand the reality of what I just said, that nobody could defeat some or two people that have the same skills that you do.
Mhm.
And so there's definitely a threshold with two or more people where you just absolutely cannot win.
Right.
And so that being the case, you need to understand, not have your ego stop you until you need to stay and stand your ground, and then use your grappling skills to make it very difficult for the bullies to get a hold of you and to hold
Mhm.
you down and keep you there, and just continue to get out of the situation.
Right.
And then also for the women's self-defense, as our daughters grow up and they get older, or if you have for, our wife or
Mhm.
friends, that we know, the concern for them is, of course, that, in an assault situation, someone's going to be on top of them in some way or somehow, on some sort of a flat surface, and that is our specialty, and how to stay safe and get to positions of power from there. So it's just a tremendous martial art, and it's absolutely my pleasure and privilege, to be able to share it in the community.
That's awesome. We're getting close to our time. I want to get to my final question. So what I've been doing on Dad Talk now is I dig up a question that some other guy has asked, like in a dad forum,
Okay.
and and this is unrelated necessarily to self-defense. It's just a question that was at least appropriate for the show. Not all of them are, and it's just an opportunity for you as a man, as a husband, as a dad, to kind of give your thought out there. And maybe some young guy is struggling with something like this or something similar, and we're just contributing to the ether of good advice out there. So let me put this up on the screen, and you can answer that. And then after that, you can give your final words, if you will. So here we are. It says, settle a debate. If someone tells you something and tells you not to tell a soul, do you tell your spouse? So that was the question. So what say you, Coach Cliff?
My wife and I do not keep secrets from each other,
Mhm.
right? And especially in under the context of parenting, right? So if one of our children someday, come up to us and they're like, hey, Dad, I'm dealing with this situation with my girlfriend, or what have you. I'd really rather not have mom involved in it. Look, my relationship with your mom came before you were born,
Mhm.
obviously, right?
Mhm.
And I'm not going to betray that. And our children are borrowed is a phrase that I think is quite accurate, right? They're going to grow up and they're going to move on and start to develop their own life, and they're going to need us less to less, or less and less. And you know, our spouse is our partner for life. So I don't know of anything that someone could tell me that I would want to keep from Jenniffer in this case. And I experienced this myself growing up. Interestingly, my dad, he operated the exact same way, but he would tell us, "Okay, sure, I'll keep your secret," and then he wouldn't, and we would know that over time. Mom might come and tell us, "Your dad told me," um, but we still loved him anyway, and we
Mhm.
still had our preferred. I'm saying we, myself and my siblings, we would have our preferred parent to go to depending on the situation, and we might try to set up some sort of a deal with them. But I think it's a mistake to try to parent
Mhm.
in any capacity without your partner, your spouse, knowing what is going on.
Gotcha.
And I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's your question to answer. All right, we're at our time. Final words for anybody watching. Where if they're in Jacksonville, how do they find you? Right. Obviously for self
Yeah,
defense, not to challenge you, of
absolutely. Yeah,
course.
absolutely. So you can find us at GracieJJBM.com. That stands for Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Baymeadows, or you could just type that into a Google search. That'll bring us right up. We offer free trial classes, so you can come in and try it and see if your child loves it and you love it and it works for your schedule. Fantastic. We'd love to have you with us. Look up, self-defense for your children. They'll thank you for it. It's as important as learning math and science, I believe, because it's absolutely applicable forever in their life, where many of the other subjects and things that they learn may not be over time.
Gotcha.
So thanks for this opportunity, DL. This has been incredible.
Awesome. I appreciate you coming on. I'm gonna put you backstage. If you need to go, that's fine. If you want to stay for a minute, we can chat for a few after the show. But thank you again for joining me. This has been a great conversation, and I hope people got a lot from you. So
All right.
thank you again. All right, folks, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. And just so you know, I'm always looking for dads to join me for Dad Talk. Again, this is my series where I invite everyday dads on to talk about what's important to them in the context of being a dad. No argument, no debate, and dads choose the topic. It's my way of raising dad voices. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you're there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. Last but not least, I want you to remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week and weekend. Catch you next time. But for now, I am out.